everyone, welcome back to our second session of the day. It's my pleasure to introduce Jan and or John Linhart, depending. He is a member of the Mautic Community Council, of the Mautic security team, and of the Mautic product team, so truly one of the people to keep Mautic moving forward. And he's here to ask and hopefully answer one simple question. Do we need segments? I'm interested, and so are you, so let's get started.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so you already hear more about me. So I'm employed by Acquia. I'm principal software engineer there. And Acquia is also sponsoring my time working on Mautic, so thank you, Acquia. And this is about ideas, and I found a quote: "Ideas are like ghosts. Once awakened, they never go to rest." And it was from Plato, but then I did some research, and Plato never said that. So this is a nice quote from ChatGPT, but I like it. So, as Jana said, do your research when prompting. All right, so this is basically an idea, and it's not my idea. Somebody put it in my head. I'm not sure who. Maybe Don Gilbert. I don't know. But I cannot get it out of my head. So my intention here is to get the idea to your heads, and maybe we will get somewhere a few years later. All right. So I will start from the beginning. What is a segment? So I hope everybody here is are fans of Venn diagrams, because I have one more. All right. So if you have all the contacts, for example, in Mautic or in other system, then you want to target the communication to just some group of it. And here I want to target it to active checks. By the way, checks, it's not a sound when you sneeze, it's my nationality. So that's a product placement here. All right, so basically you just want to find the right group. You don't want to blast everyone, right, with Czech language. All right, so you start by creating a new segment in Mautic, obviously, right? And then you add some filters. So I'm adding like filter on country equals Czech Republic. And because I want only those that are active, then I also add end condition on date last active greater than a year ago. So I will only get the checks that are active this year, that were active this year. And then you take this segment and you put it to a campaign as a source. So you have all these active checks and you want to send them some email, and probably at some points when they click on stuff, whatever the marketers do. By the way, I'm not a marketer, so this is from my technical point of view. You may tell me that I'm completely wrong. This is not how you use Mautic, but I imagine that's how you use it. All right, so there are a few problems with this approach. And one is that there is, or there might be, repeated work. I saw some customers of ours doing crazy stuff with segments. So basically, if you have like these conditions, right, and then in my case, I decided, hey, I want to add Slovaks to this campaign as well, because they used to be one country. They can understand each other. I don't want to spend another expense on creating special campaign for Slovaks, right? I'll just add them. So you will add country equals Czech Republic, or you want country Slovak Republic, right? But that's not that easy to do when you also want those that are active. So you have to duplicate the last active date condition for both. This is annoying. And this is just a simple segment. I saw much, much, much worse. Right, so another problem is complex queries. And I will dive deeper a little bit. So basically, when you are adding the filters, also the SQL query that is building this segment is growing. So this SQL query is again repeating the date last active, and it would be like if a person would write it, it would be optimized because there would be just one condition for date last active. And again, very simple example, but the duplication happens. It slows down. And this is query just for selecting batches of contacts that you want to process later. Then there is another query, more complicated, to remove the contacts that shouldn't be in the segment anymore. Again, duplicated stuff in this query. So problem 3 are unnecessary rebuilds. So whenever you've ever tried to install Mautic, you know that you have to at least enable these 3 commands in your cron jobs, in your cron tab. The first one is updating segments. The second one is updating campaigns. So basically, we have the source, so we will just move the contacts from the segments to the campaign. And then you want to trigger the campaign, so that's a third command. And you need all of these. And you shouldn't execute them at the same time, otherwise some bad stuff can happen. So basically you execute the update, segment update, at the first minute of an hour, the campaign update in 5 minutes later, and the trigger 5 minutes later. So that's like at least 10, maybe 15 minutes just to get from, hey, I want to send email to this person, and to actually sending the email. And it might be too late, or you know the feeling when you fill in a form and you're waiting for your, I don't know, invoice or a ticket to arrive. Yeah. And with this first command, you are updating all the segments for all the contacts all the time. So it's very expensive. Right. And problem 4 are duplicated data. And you're also paying for storage, and the larger the database is, the slower it is. So for example, take a look at this table, which is basically the segment membership. So it has the lead ID, which is basically segment ID, it has or contact ID, it has lead list ID, which is segment ID, when the contact was added to the segment, whether it was removed manually or added manually. And if we take a look at the campaign membership, it's basically the same table. So this command to update campaigns, it will just move all the contacts from one table to another. And it's basically the same data. All right, I'll just run through the problems, we'll get back to them. Massive code base. I search for like how many files are containing the keyword list or segment. It's like 20% of the Mautic code base. So maintaining all of that, bugs and upgrades and all that, it's a lot just for segments. So if I recap, problems with segments are repeated work for users, complex queries which are slow, unnecessary rebuilds, it just eats your CPU, duplicated data, it's a lot of stuff on your disk that shouldn't be there, and it has a massive maintenance cost of the code base. So that's not that ideal, but what should we use instead? All right, so what I'm proposing is to use campaign conditions over segment filters. Let's explore how it can be done. All right, so basically when you think about campaigns, that they are just a superset of segments, because they have these conditions which can do pretty much the same thing as segments. Joyce, is that correct? Right. Thank you. All right, so the first problem, repeated work. So you can build the same filtering system in a campaign, and you don't have to repeat the date active multiple times if you are selecting multiple countries, for example. Right, so you have your source. I will get back to that later, which might be all the contacts. And then you have a condition for date last active, and then you have two ends, basically, for one country and another country. And then you can add them to the actual campaign that you want to execute. Or you can send the email right away. So that's pretty much the same thing as the segment before. Now, about the complex queries problem, it can be simplified by adding an extra source. So on the left are the sources that we already have. Most of us probably use the first one, just use the segment as a source. We have also campaign, so if somebody fills in, form. So if somebody fills in a form, they will be directly added to this campaign. That's interesting. You can skip segments completely. So what if we add another source, which would be called something like on contact change on the right, that would only add contacts that are changing. So for the first run, it could run all the contacts, and since that, it would just add those that are changing. So you don't have to run any complex queries. It would look something like this. So it would remember when the campaign was rebuilt last time and just add those that are new or changed. Right. Unnecessary rebuilds. That's what I just said, right? So contact will change. We will add the contact to the campaign. It can go through the campaign. You can even set delays, which you can optimize the flow if you don't want to run it every 5 minutes, but once per week is fine. You can just set a delay in the campaign, and you can save on your resources. And then once the campaign is done, you just remove the contact from the campaign, and it's waiting again until that contact is changed, and it can start over again. So duplicated data, you can just eliminate the segment membership completely. So half the data size is down. It's not a big table, it's just numbers and dates, but still. And massive code base, if we can save 20% of the code, it's like when you work only 4 days a week and have 1 day extra for whatever you want to do, or maybe improve the product, or improve the parts that you want to improve. And there is more. It's not only about segments here. So these are all the categorization options that you can use with Mautic, right? So we have segments. We just talked about that. Basically, you can also have segment without filters. I like those. You don't need to rebuild those. You just add manually context to those segments. But you can also call them categories at that point, right? Just a folder for we should also implement folders. But anyway, so we have segments that do the same thing as tags, and that do the same thing as categories. We have all 3 of those that do the same thing. Maybe we can reduce it into 1. That would be an option, right? Oh, dynamic email content. Is anyone using dynamic email content here? All right. Yeah, sometimes. Not your favorite? So Jenna was talking about personalization being the big thing, right? That everybody should use automation, personalization. That's how you personalize an email, right? We have tokens. Those are simple to use, but we have also dynamic email content, and this is how the user interface look like for that. So, do you see some similarities with segment filters? So you basically define variations of the content, and then when you are sending the email, every contact will go through these variation filters that are below. Again, country equals Czech Republic, and so on. And it will say, okay, this filter is true, we will send this content to that contact. And if it's not, we will check the next variation and check the filters. Right. And if you start using that, you get something like this, where you have a lot of variations, and you don't know what's in which variation. You can't tell because it's just numbered. And you cannot move the variations around. If you want to change the order at which it will execute, check for the filters. And this is kind of hard to work with. And if you try to add more than 6, you run out of space. So you can basically just use 6.5. And when you want to manage it by API, it's very difficult because it's just an array of variations, and it's hard to work with. And again, there is a duplicated code with segments, but also with dynamic web content. Is anyone using dynamic web content? So those are two separate things in Mautic. And they also live into code bases. They have different data store. And again, you can see similarities with segment filters. So if only we would merge dynamic email content with dynamic web content, and we would just have dynamic content, period, that would be much simpler for the users, right? Basically, they could even share the same content on email on their web page and email. This is also what Jenna was talking about. Same experience in different channels. We can implement easily the order change, which filter should be executed first. You can add more than 6. You can even add more than 600 because it's a different table structure. It's very simple to do. You know what is what because there is a name. It's not visible on this screen, but on this the first tab, there is a name. You can name it, so you know what is the dynamic content about. And it's easy to manage by API. So we could just reduce one dynamic content and use dynamic web content for emails very easily. Right. Point actions. How I hate those. Right, so point actions, and I never know what are point actions and what are point triggers. I always have to open the form to figure out what's what, even after 10 years after working on this project. Right, so apparently point action is when something happens, add points to this contact. Right, so if the contact opens an email, add 10 points. Is that what it is? No, never sure. So this happens during the request as well. It's not happening in the background. So if you have some expensive, like expenses meaning slow action here, it can time out, and it will be bad experience for the user, for the contact. It will be loss of data for you. What if we would just use campaigns instead and do the same thing? It would run on the background. It would work. And we can just delete point actions. Point triggers. Next on the list. So this is, So when point changes to some limit that you will set, it will execute some action. So it's the opposite of point action. Again, we can just delete them and use campaigns, right? We'll do the same thing. We can reduce the code base, maintenance cost. Developers could be happy. They could just build stuff that matters. And for users, it's just when do I use point triggers? When do I use campaigns? Just don't use point triggers. Another, form actions. And this one is a bit tricky than point triggers. We can just remove them today, but form actions are more tricky. But again, if you can, don't use form actions. Just use campaigns, again, because all these actions will execute when the contact is submitting the form. And it can time out if you are sending an email and as an action, and the email SMTP server is acting up, it will time out. The email will never be sent, the form submission will never be stored, the contact is upset, and you will lose data. Right, so you can replace it with a campaign. Very simple campaign. And we already have a source, contact source for that. Just use form as a source. All right, so if everything I said is true and marketers will agree, then we could simplify Mautic quite a bit. So this is a photo of SpaceX Raptor engines and their evolution. And Mautic 4 was kind of scary. We reduced the code base quite a lot. We simplified stuff. So Mautic 5 is a little bit better. Mautic 6 could be even simpler to use for users, simple to maintain, easier, and even cheaper to run. If we just remove some duplication and use campaigns instead. So now the idea. So the idea is to reduce duplicated features in Mautic and save some headaches. And now that you have that in your head, I hope that you will take an action and say, hey, I will just remove the point actions, I hate those, and submit it. And there will be a discussion, and maybe we can even find how to migrate from point actions to campaigns, so nobody will lose their point actions. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. Are there any questions? Yes.
You talked about on-contact change as a new source for campaigns. Does that imply that whenever any information about a contact changed, they would start the campaign?
Yeah.
Because we got a couple of customers who have like CRM systems and are pushing their entire contact base to Mautic. And if I look at the audit log, it looks like they get updated, but zeros just stay zeros, but it gets an entry.
Yeah.
So they would count as an updated contact?
Well, maybe we can add a filter there. So if specific field changes, send them this campaign.
That would make sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Any more questions? Yes.
I like really much the idea of simplify it. And so I think the result will be that you have a lot of campaigns. Yeah?
Yes.
Probably 300 campaigns. And there needs to be, or that would be amazing to have possibility to categorize them, or also often a campaign you have a landing page, yeah, you have a forum, you have several emails, to group them somehow together, you know, like okay, this campaign.
Yeah.
This, and this, yeah. So like these campaigns I use only for points, yeah, point triggers. And this campaign I only use make my segments.
Yeah, you are right. It will be very messy if there will be just hundreds of campaigns and you don't have like folders to, That's probably what, Ruth, you introduced this folders or projects initiative last year, right? So that's already taken care of, I believe. Yeah. Right now there are categories that you can put different campaigns, landing pages, emails into one category, but it sucks because you cannot basically see all the entities in that category in some view.
I saw some idea from Anderson again, where he tried to link together different components of a campaign.
Yeah, I think it's coming.
My second question, sorry, Troy. You said get rid of actions in form actions, yeah. And there is one point which called send for results.
Yeah.
We really use it very often.
I know. That's why I said form actions are tricky. Yeah.
Will be there an idea to integrate form actions without saving them as a field, yeah? Otherwise you need to create the field
Yeah.
and read over a segment. But if you have not created so many fields, you ask, for example, are you vegan or vegetarian or whatever, you don't want to save this in your CRM, it's just for this event.
Yep.
We can also send those things via a campaign.
Yeah, we can add this or move this action to a campaign, but the tricky part is that the campaigns are, and good thing about campaigns, is that they are executed on the background few minutes later or few seconds later. And then it will be kind of tricky to find, like if the contact submits several times with different fields, like what should we send the contact, because now we have 3 conflicting submissions. Maybe the last one probably would make sense, but yeah, it can be done. We just have to figure out the details.
Thank you.
Joey?
So, when you were mentioning things, I was also thinking what Dan said, that this contact change has to be looking for something, because when contacts visit something, there's a contact change. I think they changes, so you really have to, that's gonna, like, if you have lots of visitors, that's a lot of work, and
Yep.
we shouldn't forget that we're not only monitoring the email, people who have email, but also anonymous contacts, so, but if you can set a filter, that's great. And I really like the idea. I see it as a huge pressure on the campaign cron jobs. So maybe we can invent something like immediately chained events, where you don't just push one event, but you just say, okay, let's do these 5 events immediately, So you make all the changes what you need for one contact, like 5 actions, instead of moving them one step forward in the campaign. You actually do everything in one. Maybe we can rename the campaigns into automations. And then we don't have to explain to customers all the time, no, campaign is not where you send your emails. We're not primary sender emails.
Yeah.
So, and about the point trigger, so I like in Mautic that there are certain things which are happening without the cron job, exactly for that reason, that I don't have to push them forward with the trigger command. And the form actions is one of them, and the point triggers is the other one. And in point triggers, there are some sophisticated ones, like give 5 points if the person came back to the website within 1 hour. Like that's really hard to manage with the campaign. But on the other hand, maybe it's not, because maybe you can have such a campaign step, I don't know, which is mitigating that. So my first thoughts were backward compatibility. Also have to redo all my videos. And but in general, I think it's amazing, and it's getting closer also to other systems, what they do. So if we can solve this, that things are happening, I think it's an amazing idea.
Yeah. I think that all these duplicate things happened only because we wanted to check a mark. Hey, we have the same thing as the other automation systems have. maybe if we would think harder, like, hey, we can do this with the campaign, we would save a lot of trouble to us and to our users. Ruth?
I think one of the areas where I see marketers using segments a lot is when they're creating an email that they're sending to a specific segment. And you do that within the creating email process.
Yep.
And that's super simple if you've already got the segment.
Yeah.
Super simple. So how would you envisage that happening if there was no such thing as segments anymore?
Well, I don't like segments with filters. Those I call them dynamic segments that are constantly changing, but I like static segments without filters. This is basically just a folder for your contacts. And you can use campaign to put the contacts in that segment.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically saying ditch dynamic segments, but keep static lists.
Yeah. Static lists, and we have, as I mentioned on one slide, we have categories, we have tags, we have segments that do the same thing.
So instead of a dynamic segment, you would put them into whatever grouping they needed to be in by adding tags, for example, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you send that email, you would send it to a segment that you created that contains those people.
Yeah.
As a user, I feel like that is 5 steps more than what we're doing now. As a developer, I understand why you don't like the dynamic segments, but I'm just sort of thinking that as a user, that would be a bit confusing.
Yeah.
You have to create a campaign to add tags, to add them to a static, to add them to a...
Yeah. I was thinking about that it might be more clicks to do. But maybe instead of... I'll just try to find the UI for segments so we can talk about that. Where is it? Here? Oh, it's not changing there. Oh, this is interesting. All right, so basically when you have these filters tab here, it could be like a filter builder. Like we have email builder, campaign builder. So it would open a campaign builder that would be limited to only conditions. Basically, you can draw the same filters that you are used to in Filters tab in the campaign view. And it basically is the same process.
So it's creating that dynamic filtering,
Yeah.
it's using a campaign, and then that drops them into that segment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just add something there? Okay, just from a marketing perspective, can I just add something? Yeah. Just with the dynamic segments, the challenge, the reason why marketers like dynamic segments, which I know you're saying you didn't like, is because when the behaviour changes of a customer, then that dynamic segment also reflects that change. If the segment's really static and kind of fixed, then if a customer purchases something completely different, or they make a recent purchase, it's not necessarily reflected. So in like the email campaign, it would take into account if someone's behaviour has been they've purchased something in the past, send this. If you don't have that type of flexibility in the segment, then that campaign then becomes void. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's very difficult to manage segments.
Yeah, and you will basically lose the automation, right? Part of the software.
Or send the wrong one.
Yeah.
That's the danger of it.
Yeah. I'm just saying let's move the dynamic part to a different part of the application, but yeah, it still should be dynamic. Otherwise, yeah, what's the point of using marketing automation without automation? Yeah. It will be defined somewhere else.
Just a quick technical question, I'd say. You talk about forms and the difference between standalone form and campaign forms. Why don't we merge those two together?
Right.
Because we have the case that we would like to use campaign forms to start a campaign immediately. But we would need for double-in purposes, for example, to send the mail as soon as the form gets submitted. The issue now is that we have to wait about 60 seconds if we're unlucky for the campaign to trigger.
Yep.
So So if the contact is faster, opening his emails and clicking the link, then we will never actually be able to filter out in the campaign that he clicked the link and reduce that information.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that we will have to solve another way. This will be probably next presentation. Yeah, we will have to introduce some queues. That's actually what we use at Acquia, and it's kind of close to real time. Yeah, and now we can make it better with Mautic because the open source projects around queues are now much better than 10 years ago.
Okay. And the second one, you showed the contact categories as part of your presentation.
Yep.
But I feel like those are, at least in the state, currently completely abandoned from every parent.
Well,
you cannot use them in segment filters or campaign conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think they are there only. Like if you have segments, you can categorize them, and then the contact can choose in their preference center. I want to receive emails only from category A, category B, not C. So that's how they are used. But yeah, nobody knows about that, I think.
Thank you.
All right.
Any final questions? No? Then thank you so much for your talk. Again, you have given us a lot to think about and also a lot to look forward to in Mautic 6. We will be back at 11:30.
Thank you.